have invaded the whole province of Semipolatinsk, and for some days, by forced marches, have been descending the Irtish. You must hurry if you wish to get to Omsk before them." "Indeed I must," replied Michael. "It is reported also that Colonel Ogareff has succeeded in passing the frontier in disguise, and that he may not be slow in joining the Tartar chief in their revolted country." "But how do they know it?" asked Michael, whom this news, more or less true, so directly concerned. "Oh, as these things are always known," replied Alcide, "it is in the air." "Then have you really reason to think that Colonel Ogareff is in Siberia?" "I myself have heard it said that he was to take the road from Kazan to Ekaterenburg." "Ah, you know that, Mr. Jolivet?" said Harry Blount, roused from his silence. "I knew it," replied Alcide. "And do you know that he went disguised as a gypsy?" asked Blount. "As a gypsy!" exclaimed Michael, almost involuntarily, and he suddenly remembered the look of the old Bohemian at Nijni Novgorod, his voyage on board the Caucasus, and his disembarking at Kazan. "Just well enough to make a few remarks on the subject in a letter to my cousin," replied Alcide, smiling. "You lost no time at Kazan," dryly observed the Englishman. "No, my dear fellow; and while the Caucasus was laying in her supply of fuel, I was employed in obtaining a store of information." Michael no longer listened to the repartee which Harry Blount and Alcide exchanged. He was thinking of the gypsy troop, of the old Tsigane, whose face he had not been able to see, and of the strange woman who accompanied him, and then of the peculiar glance which she had cast at him. Suddenly, close by, he heard a pistol shot. "Ah, forward, sirs!" cried he. "Hullo!" said Alcide to himself, "this quiet merchant who always avoids bullets is in a great hurry to go where they are flying about just now." Quickly followed by Harry Blount, who was not a man to be behind in danger, he dashed after Michael. In another instant the three were opposite the projecting rock which protected the tarantass at the turning of the road. The clump of pines struck by the lightning was still burning. There was no one to be seen. However, Michael was not mistaken. Suddenly a dreadful growling was heard, and then another report. "A bear!" cried Michael, who could not mistake the growling. "Nadia! Nadia!" And drawing his cutlass from his belt, Michael bounded round the buttress behind which the young girl had promised to wait. The pines, completely enveloped in flames, threw a wild glare on the scene. As Michael reached the tarantass, a huge animal retreated towards him. It was a monstrous bear. The tempest had driven it from the woods, and it had come to seek refuge in this cave, doubtless its habitual retreat, which Nadia then occupied. Two of the horses, terrified at the presence of the enormous creature, breaking their traces, had escaped, and the iemschik, thinking only of his beasts, leaving Nadia face to face with the bear, had gone in pursuit of them. But the brave girl had not lost her presence of mind. The animal, which had not at first seen her, was attacking the remaining horse. Nadia, leaving the shelter in which she had been crouching, had run to the carriage, taken one of Michael's revolvers, and advancing resolutely toward the bear, had fired close to it. The animal, slightly wounded in the shoulder, turned on the girl, who rushed for protection behind the tarantass, but then, seeing that the horse was attempting to break its traces, and knowing that if it did so, and the others were not recovered, their journey could not be continued, with the most perfect coolness she again approached the bear, and as it raised its paws to strike her down, gave it the contents of the second barrel. This was the report which Michael had just heard. In an instant he was on the spot. Another bound and he was between the bear and the girl. His arm made one movement upwards, and the enormous beast, ripped up by that terrible knife, fell to the ground, a lifeless mass. He had executed in splendid style the famous blow of the Siberian hunters, who endeavor not to damage the precious fur of the bear, which fetches a high price. "You are not wounded, sister?" said Michael, springing to the side of the young girl. "No, brother," replied Nadia. At that moment the two journalists came up. Alcide seized the horse's head, and in an instant his strong wrist mastered it. His companion and he had seen Michael's rapid stroke. "Bravo!" cried Alcide. "For a simple merchant, Mr. Korpanoff, you handle the hunter's knife in a most masterly fashion." "Most masterly indeed," added Blount. "In Siberia," replied Michael, "we are obliged to do a little of everything." Alcide regarded him attentively. Seen in the bright glare, his knife dripping with blood, his tall figure, his foot firm on the huge carcass, he was indeed worth looking at. "A formidable fellow," said Alcide to himself. Then, advancing respectfully, he saluted the young girl. Nadia bowed slightly. Alcide turned towards his companion. "The sister worthy of the brother," said he. "Now, were I a bear, I should not meddle with two so brave and so charming." Harry Blount, perfectly upright, stood hat in hand at some distance. His companion's easy manners only increased his usual stiffness. At that moment the iemschik, who had succeeded in recapturing his two horses, reappeared. He cast a regretful glance at the magnificent animal lying on the ground, loath to leave it to the birds of prey, and then proceeded once more to harness his team. Michael acquainted him with the traveler's situation, and his intention of loaning one of the horses. "As you please," replied the iemschik. "Only, you know, 2 carriages instead of 1." "All right, my friend," said Alcide, who understood the insinuation. "We will pay double." "Then gee up, my turtle doves!" cried the iemschik. Nadia again took her place in the tarantass. Michael and his companions followed on foot. It was 3 o'clock. The storm still swept with terrific violence across the defile. When the first streaks of daybreak appeared the tarantass had reached the telga, which was still conscientiously embedded as far as the center of the wheel. Such being the case, it can be easily understood how a sudden jerk would separate the front from the hinder part. One of the horses was now harnessed by means of cords to the remains of the telga, the reporters took their place on the singular equipage, and the 2 carriages started off. They had now only to descend the Ural slopes, in doing which there was not the slightest difficulty. 6 hours afterwards the 2 vehicles, the tarantass preceding the telga, arrived at Ekaterenburg, nothing worthy of note having happened in the descent. The first person the reporters perceived at the door of the post house was their iemschik, who appeared to be waiting for them. This worthy Russian had a fine open countenance, and he smilingly approached the travelers, and holding out his hand, in a quiet tone he demanded the usual pourboire. This very cool request roused Blount's ire to its highest pitch, and had not the iemschik prudently retreated, a straight-out blow of the fist, in true British boxing style, would have paid his claim of navodko. Alcide Jolivet, at this burst of anger, laughed as he had never laughed before. "But the poor devil is quite right," he cried. "He is perfectly right, my dear fellow. It is not his fault if we did not know how to follow him." Then, drawing several kopecks from his pocket, "Here, my friend," said he, handing them to the iemschik, "take them. If you have not earned them, it is not your fault." This redoubled Mr. Blount's irritation. He even began to speak of a lawsuit against the owner of the telga. "A lawsuit in Russia, my dear fellow!" cried Alcide. "Things must indeed change should it ever be brought to a conclusion. Did you never hear the story of the wet nurse, who claimed payment of 12 months' nursing of some poor little infant?" "I never heard it," replied Harry Blount. "Then you do not know what that suckling had become by the time judgment was given in favor of the nurse?" "What was he, pray?" "Colonel of the Imperial Guard!" At this reply all burst into a laugh. Alcide, enchanted with his own joke, drew out his notebook, and in it wrote the following memorandum, destined to figure in a forthcoming French and Russian dictionary: "Telga, a Russian carriage with 4 wheels, that is when it starts, with 2 wheels when it arrives at its destination." End of Book 1, Chapter 11.